This is how to replace a factory Van Diemen clutch slave cylinder with an aftermarket Tilton or Saab style slave. We did get the car out again and had a pretty successful weekend with no breakdowns and even bested my old personal lap record from years ago. Unfortunately, the slave rebuild only worked for the first day and a half until it blew out again. By the end of the last day, you could visibly see clutch fluid squirting out of the bell housing whenever I pressed the pedal, but it worked enough to get rolling, so we were able to race at least. I did end up stuck out on track once, though. Someone had spun off and started a brush fire, which red flagged the session. I could not restart with a dead clutch and had to wait out in the sun for a flat tow. Thankfully, a flagger took pity on me and brought me a cool rag and a water bottle. After discussing this with the posters on Apex Speed, I learned that these Van Diemen slaves have always been a problem. That once they start having problems, they continue to have problems, and that I probably have the only car left in the country that has not been updated to a Tilton or Saab slave. Here's a video anyway, just in case there is someone else left who hasn't made the switch. The basic idea of the conversion is to turn the housing for the old slave into a mount for the new one. To do this, the first thing that needs to be done is turn the face of the old slave flat. A good friend of mine with machinist skills did this part for me. Once the bevel is machined off, put it back on the car with the new slave on top of it as it would be mounted and measure the clearance from the face of the bearing to the clutch diaphragm fingers. I've been given two tolerance goals for this from two different people, a 170 to 230 thou clearance and a 150 to 190 thou clearance, so we aimed for a tolerance that fits within both ranges. To measure, we took a piece of bar stock I had lying around and laid it across the face of the clutch. We measured from the bar to the rear face of the engine where the bell housing mounts up, then measured from the bar to the diaphragm fingers, and subtracted that value from the first measurement. Then we measured from the face of the bell housing to the slave bearing and subtracted the previous value from that to get the gap. To our surprise, we got a gap of 190 thou, so no further work was needed. You may need to have your machinist make you a spacer that fits between the new slave and the housing of the old one, if this gap is too big on your car. It is important not to overextend the piston. After that, all that needs to be done is drill and tap to mount the new slave. My machinist friend also made a piece to ensure it is perfectly centered when mounted. A side note, something I learned from the last time is that oil will leak out of your bell housing if you do not RTV the crap out of everything, despite having fresh and correct O-rings. Whatever previous owner of this car did this before, I now understand, and everything is forgiven. I had to split the car 3 more times before I fixed all the leaking. Oil was even coming through the bolt holes, so I RTV'd the bolt threads too. I recommend stopping up the lower fitting and filling the tank with oil while the bell housing is off, so you can watch and see if anything leaks and save yourself the trouble of taking the car apart multiple times if it does. The final thing that needs to be done after the car is reassembled and clutch fluid is bled is to set the clutch pedal stop. You can tell when the clutch is disengaged fully by putting the car on the ground, putting the car in gear, and having someone push the car. Then slowly push the clutch pedal in. Once the car breaks free and starts to roll, that is where you will want your pedal stop to hit. The pedal should travel about 1/4 of an inch past where there starts to be pressure to fully disengaged. You want no more than 0.2 inches of actual bearing travel once the bearing first contacts the diaphragm fingers. That's it. The job is done and the clutch slave is now upgraded to a fancy Tilton. Hopefully this will provide reliable operation next year.